Welcome to Electrified. It's your host, Dylan Loomis. Quick shout out to my newest patron, Charles J. Thank you for choosing to support the channel. I'm sure most of you have already seen this news about NHTSA updating its rules by now, but we need to clarify what exactly is changing and when it might go into effect. NHTSA is updating its rules to allow domestically produced autonomous vehicles to qualify for exemptions to U.S. auto safety standards previously only offered to imports. And pausing here, understandably, I have seen many questions on why these exemptions only applied to imports to begin with. The short answer is this previously offered exemption was really rooted in old NHTSA rules we're talking from decades ago that really were just carried forward, but the initial focus was to allow non-compliant vehicles for three purposes: research, testing, or display. But when it comes to autonomous vehicles, there really was no specific AV policy or specific exemptions. It's just that through some existing trade laws, again from decades ago, were actually carried forward and applied to autonomous vehicles because there were some regulatory gaps in the FMVSS, the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards. I don't think the majority of you would enjoy it if I really got into the weeds on this import exemption. I just want you to know these exemptions were actually put in place in the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1966. And at the time, obviously the rules were designed to regulate vehicle imports broadly, not just autonomous vehicles, because at the time that wasn't really a thing. But if you have a brain like mine, you'll likely want to know why this was put in place, and there are really two main reasons. The first, to facilitate trade and flexibility. The way I understand it at the time, this move was focused on trade and customs policies, really just trying to avoid overly restrictive barriers that could harm international relations or limit access to certain innovative tech. And the second reason was to support non-commercial use, which gets back to the reason of prototypes, test vehicles, exhibitions, research, etc. And then fast forward to today, when autonomous vehicles emerged, those pre-existing import rules were then just applied to foreign-made autonomous prototypes. So these foreign companies could classify their AVs as research vehicles, which would allow them to bypass the FMVSS compliance. And this exemption, which is called HS7, was never at any large scale. NHTSA most likely viewed these imported test vehicles as much lower risk because they were limited in number and then the scope of how they were actually going to be used. Sometimes they would only be allowed on test tracks or in very specific small locations. On the flip side, the argument was domestic autonomous vehicles, especially from bigger automakers, could actually achieve scale a lot faster, which understandably would prompt greater scrutiny. But yes, obviously in practice, and even if unintentionally, this definitely benefited foreign companies. So why wasn't this overhauled years ago? Well, again, think about how the government works. Overhauling FMVSS standards or creating a new AV-specific framework was going to take years of research and comment periods and then congressional approval. So rather than going through all of that, NHTSA basically said, let's just use the framework that's already in place. Probably because it was easy and AVs were at such a small scale that most people just didn't really care. But guess what? There was one person over the past few years who started to advocate for this exemption to go away and to change. That person is Elon Musk. So say what you will about his political involvement and brand damage, but as I've been saying, there is another side to that coin. I'll stop there. I hope I didn't lose too many of you going down that rabbit hole. I just saw plenty of people that had no idea why that was there in the first place, and I thought it'd be interesting to find out. Back to the news, NHTSA also said it's going to loosen some of the reporting requirements when it comes to accidents. NHTSA is actively engaged in developing a multifaceted regulatory framework for vehicles with automated driving systems. To be clear, it has not been developed yet, so this may not actually be operational until early 2027, possibly sooner if this administration continues on the deregulation path. But as we've seen, there's likely to be a fair amount of pushback from consumer advocacy groups, certain state leadership that comes out and frames it as wanting to protect their people from testing technology on them, that whole line of thinking. NHTSA did say they'll maintain the safety benefits of reporting on these accidents while reducing unnecessary burdens. So yes, of course, it's great to hear that this is really happening, because when this federal framework goes into effect, that will truly be a game breaker for Tesla. This whole game is about two things: cost and scale. Tesla has the cost side figured out. Tesla has the scale side figured out. So when they solve for unsupervised, which they may have already done with the alpha builds they're testing in Austin, call it version 14, everybody here already knows what's going to happen. This whole thing is setting up very serendipitously. Tesla gets to scale unsupervised cautiously and state by state, wherever the regulations are the most lax for the next 12 to 18 months or so. Ensure safety, test the app, improve the user experience, work out the bugs, collect more data, build relationships with regulators, build a customer base, etc. And then let's call it 2027 for the federal framework to be complete and in effect. Then the floodgates open and Tesla can flip the switch and turn its entire fleet into robotaxi capable vehicles, rather than going state by state and dealing with the 50 different types of paperwork, reporting requirements, and operational guidelines. And sure, Tesla will likely have to retrofit Hardware 3 vehicles, which will be painful and laborious, but every time Tesla does an FSD transfer promotion, like they're running right now by the way, if the customers trade in a Hardware 3 vehicle, Tesla can do the upgrade to AI4 while they own the vehicle before sending it back out, which reduces the number of retrofits Tesla will have to do in the future. The customer wins and Tesla wins. And honestly, I mean, who else is going to compete? Sure, Waymo's scaling its rides per week number well, but as far as we know, their entire fleet is still around 1,000, and Alphabet's Other Bets category still lost over $1 billion in Q4, and that segment is primarily driven by Waymo. And then today we actually had Business Insider of all publications saying Tesla has about 300 test operators and has worked to build up critical miles in Austin. We already know Tesla's testing the robotaxi app with Autopilot engineers, but they also held an event with local first responders. They said over the past few months, about 300 Tesla test operators have been driving through the city's streets around the clock using prototypes of the company's self-driving software as part of a program they're calling Project Rodeo. They said during Tesla's layoffs in April last year, it eliminated several test drivers and moved Project Rodeo from general vehicle testing to the Autopilot department under Ashok. Since then, the intensity of the program has increased substantially, and many workers have shifted from updating Tesla's FSD to robotaxi development. Now, I could break down this one sentence for the next 10 minutes, but I don't want to read too far into it. I'll just say the bearish way to read this would be that Tesla moved some Autopilot engineers to really just focus on robotaxi in Austin, and that's part of why we haven't had a wider major FSD release now for a few months. But the more neutral reading is that any progress on robotaxi development only runs through improving Tesla's FSD system. The article said internally Tesla has set a June 1st deadline for the launch, but we just heard Elon say maybe June or July, so I'm not sure how much stock I'd put into that. But they said Elon has been told during weekly Autopilot meetings with Ashok that the company is on track to hit it. Workers said they had not received details about the event or what it would entail. At this point, I just want to stop and say I do feel dirty reading a Business Insider article here, but this line alone, for example, are they talking about an event like an unveil event or a get-together to celebrate this, or are they just saying the event is actually launching unsupervised? They don't clarify at all. And then they have quotes from former workers, and we know how that can go, but for what it's worth, they said it feels forced. It's this breakthrough moment for Tesla, but there's also this feeling of so many last-minute details being up in the air. And somebody else said the June 1st deadline is more aspirational as a motivational tactic, which makes sense. We've seen that from Elon and Tesla for years. Apparently, the test drivers said they're given specialized testing routes, including critical tracks, where they're encouraged to avoid avoid intervening and adversarial tracks, which simulate emergency scenarios like re-entering traffic from a roadside stop. Tesla has been working with the local emergency services, and in March, Tesla performed about 6 hours of testing with local first responders, including members of the police and fire departments at a closed testing track. About 60 drivers were split between Tesla's test vehicles and personal vehicles in order to mimic normal traffic scenarios. And it's lines like this why I decided to go through this article. They said a spokesperson from the Austin Police Department confirmed Tesla held a testing day with first responders. They said this Apple test flight version of the Robotaxi app allows Tesla employees to get free rides in a geo-fenced region, and in Austin, the Robotaxi service is set to roll out across such an area. And I know people panic when they see the geo-fenced word, but I mean, what did you think rolling out in one city was? They said there has been some discussion around using remote operators as safety drivers for the public rollout. The workers operate in a designated facility in California with remote controllers. But here there's even more confusion because it's one or the other. You're either a remote operator and outside of the vehicle, or you're a safety driver and you're inside the vehicle. You can't be both. And the only way I can see to remove the confusion from this line would be that there are only remote operators and they're just acting as safety drivers, meaning there wouldn't actually be a safety driver in the vehicle because the remote operators are assuming that role. Tesla has moved some test drivers into remote operator roles. And while Austin and San Francisco remain high priority testing areas, Tesla employs test drivers across other cities like New York, Phoenix, Seattle, and Atlanta. So there you have it. Tesla's overfitting of Austin actually has a name: Project Rodeo. Remember that lawsuit against GM over what they're doing with customers' driving data? Get this. Now GM is arguing it did not violate their customers' privacy because driving a vehicle, which involves conduct that takes place on public roads, can't form the basis for any privacy-based claim. And no surprise, 2 data brokers named in the suit that bought the data from GM are arguing the same thing. There is, of course, a lot more to the story, but it just goes to show that data is the new gold and it's a huge business. I've talked at length about the absurdity of the size of the data broker industry, and if you're not doing anything about it for your family, you're really just sitting ducks. That's part of why I'm still working with Delete Me, the sponsor of this video, which is the easiest way to remove your personal data from the thousands of data brokers that are out there, as Delete Me does all of the legwork for you. It's an American company. They've been around for over a decade. Their service is excellent, their prices are very affordable, and it saves you a ton of time and headaches. I've been using Delete Me for my family now for years, and look at this. This quarter, they still had to remove 25 listings because new data brokers constantly pop up, and I use the internet for basically everything. So that's part of why this service is so valuable. So if you'd like to take your privacy back for you and your family, head to joindeleteme.com/electrified to get 20% off using my code electrified linked below, or by using the QR code on the screen. And how about this? The former CEO of Waymo, John Krafcik, just said Tesla has failed utterly and completely at this for each of the past 10 years it's hyped up its robotaxis. Krafcik also said Tesla has never competed with Waymo. They've never sold a robotaxi ride to a public rider. In the long run, the cost of sensors has a trivial cost per mile impact over the useful life of a robotaxi while also providing massive quantifiable safety benefits. And listen, I don't know what you guys would define as trivial, but even if Waymo's cost per vehicle with their Gen 6 is down to $100,000 per unit, down from about $150,000 plus before, that's still more than double Tesla's cost per unit. And that's assuming Waymo dropped its cost per unit by about $50,000 in one generation, which I think is incredibly generous and probably unlikely. To top it off though, Craft Chick said, well, after 10 years of undelivered promises, it seems pretty rational for those watching to be data and evidence driven. There's still a lot of promises, still no Tesla liability for FSD driving performance, and still no universal robotaxi service. So look, if you want to be a rear view mirror gazer and get fixed there, fine, be my guest. But to ignore what's coming ahead and to completely dismiss what Tesla is about to do, I just don't understand it. Like, has Elon been wrong for a while? Yes, but are things very different now? Also yes. Today we also learned that California is overhauling its self-driving vehicle regulations. The California DMV said today it's seeking public comment on proposed regulations that would apply to self-driving vehicles, both from the likes of Waymo all the way to heavy-duty driverless trucks like those from Plus AI. A spokesperson said the proposed regulations offer the nation's most comprehensive rules for the operation of autonomous vehicles. Going to California's DMV website, they said the 45-day public comment period for these regulations begins on April 25th this year and runs through June 9th. Zipping through the proposed regulations, because they are subject to change, there would be a new phased permit process for light-duty vehicles. Step 1 would be a drivered testing permit, which is required initially for testing with a safety driver. Then there's a driverless testing permit, which requires 50,000 miles of testing with a drivered testing permit in the operational design domain. And then there would be a deployment permit, which requires 50,000 miles of testing in the ODD with either a drivered or a driverless testing permit. And the latter two both also have a safety assessment. Unfortunately, they have expanded the data reporting requirements, and they would be asking for monthly reporting on disengagements, vehicle immobilizations, hard braking events, and system failures. And that would be in addition to crash reporting aligned with NHTSA's guidelines. Manufacturers would also be required to update their first responder interaction plans frequently and provide ongoing training. So the biggest changes I found were 1, the reporting requirements. Previously it was annual reporting, and now it's looking like they're moving to monthly reporting. And the second change would just be that 50,000 mile requirement for some of these permits. Before this proposal, there really was no explicit mileage requirement. They would just rely on the data they had. Now, for a company like Tesla with a large fleet in California, it's probably not going to be super difficult to hit that 50,000 mile mark in certain operational domains. But for smaller players, obviously that could be a bit of a hurdle. So overall, my takeaway from reading through this is that these proposals would actually require more regulation, not less. And if you're out there thinking, wait a second, why is California still working on this when it's clear that they're pushing for a federal framework to override all of these state rules? To that, my answer would be because this federal framework is still quite uncertain. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, and it's not really prescriptive, meaning it's not telling any states what to do right now. So until that federal framework is actually figured out and put in place, the states still need to go by something. At least a state like California that prefers to have regulations, because they've been doing this now for autonomous vehicles for over a decade. So that's what I was getting at. Will a state like California that's been working at this for a long time just roll over and give up everything that it's worked on to adopt this federal framework that would supersede what they've done? So if this new federal framework expressly said that it preempts any state law, or if there was a direct conflict between the federal framework and what California had in place, then my understanding is California would have to give up its AV regulations. But if that preemption is not explicit in the federal framework, then I would guess California might have some sort of legal basis to push back. So I think today was perfect timing for this news, because it just highlights that this process is not going to be smooth and without a hitch. It's going to take time. So yes, we can all be excited and encouraged that we're moving the right direction, but my guess is we're still going to be waiting throughout most of 2026 for all of the dust to settle with this. A quick aside, I have no inside information here, but my gut is telling me with Elon focusing more on Tesla starting next month, things are about to pick up yet again in Tesla land.
Well, I'm putting my chips on Musk. You are on Musk.
Yeah, because I don't think Waymo scales the way that people think.
Their trips are up 5x.
Yeah, 250,000 a week.
No, it's
250,000
on real
trips
streets.
a week.
Go and read what Musk said about what he's going to do.
You guys know Cramer is irrelevant in my book, but I shared because Elon replied saying, uh-oh, inverse Cramer is tough karma to overcome. I'm calling weekend reviews with autopilot to accelerate progress. Now, could this post be interpreted as a joke, the whole thing? I would say yes, but for whatever reason to me, this last line did seem more serious. But even if this one in particular was a joke, we know this is what we're going to get more of, with Elon having less mental capacity and energy focusing on Doge and more back at Tesla. I'm just not going to try to hide it. The second half of this year for Tesla is shaping up to be incredibly exciting. And what's crazy is that's likely just a warm-up for what we have in store next year. On that note, Tesla said another one hatched, sharing a new post from a new Tesla Semi account on X. Dan Priestley replied saying, drive quietly and carry a big load. I just think your company's in a pretty good position when a new business line that will likely do over $1 billion in annual profits in time is mostly an afterthought for the business model. And guess what? Those numbers don't even include Tesla Semi doing autonomous operations. And sure, I think it's fair to argue the Tesla Semis won't be operating unsupervised for a while. Maybe they're going to need more time than the passenger fleet, but given the percentage of highway miles that the semis do and more predictable routes, it's just this next disruption wave is so close we can almost taste it, but still a bit more waiting ahead. And yesterday, quickly, because I'm sure most of you saw this, Keys said that Tesla secured a 2-year exemption to run FSD supervised on public roads in Norway. It's been approved by the Norwegian Road Authority, and it allows version 13, modified steering and speed control, Tesla-trained drivers only on registered EU type-approved vehicles. The intent is simple, to prove it works, but with regulators watching. And we know FSD is already being tested in the Netherlands. So right now, Norway and the Netherlands form Tesla's foundation of their multi-country approval strategy. We touched on Article 39 before, but with the RDW's blessing, which is the regulatory body, Tesla can escalate to the European Commission, and that vote is expected in May 2025. If passed, FSD supervised rolls out across Europe, starting in the Netherlands. So FSD is not waiting for European regulatory bodies to catch up, it's already driving and national regulators are allowing it. But wait, there's more. There are 2, maybe 3 more countries in the EU that are testing FSD with regulatory approval and oversight. And what have we said all along? Most regulators are not going to be the ones that get pointed at and blamed for leaving their country in the dust. Meaning, once there's enough momentum and testing and data, then the floodgates should open. And to me, it really does feel like we're at the very beginning stages of that happening. I was able to find for this Article 39, the European Commission can actually authorize exemption, which would allow FSD for all of the EU. But in the meantime, other member states can also accept the provisional approval from the RDW, which means additional EU countries can allow FSD before the European Commission would give everybody the green light. And this was funny, literally as I'm reading this one, Elon replied to it saying, very cool. Honestly, at this point, I almost feel bad for people that cannot see the writing all over the wall on where this is all headed in relatively short order. More from Waymo, they're now saying they may offer their robotaxis for personal ownership in the future. Sundar really didn't say anything else other than there's a future optionality for personal ownership. But how many people are going to pay $100,000 for this vehicle in the handful of cities where they will operate? On X, Elon said again, Waymo needs Waymo money to succeed. It really should be obvious though that Waymo is going to start squirming a bit because it definitely knows what's coming. And to this day, it still does not have a viable or profitable business model. So it's most likely going to start trying a bunch of of different things to figure something out in the next 12 to 18 months. We also have VW agreeing to supply thousands of electric vans in a collaboration agreement with Uber. This as they seek to offer rides in fully autonomous vehicles in the US over the next decade. Testing is expected to begin later this year, with the first commercial launch of the service on the Uber platform expected in LA in 2026. They said during initial testing and launch phases, the VW vans branded as ID Buzz AD will have a person on board to help refine the technology and ensure safety. Again, if it's somehow not clear, it's just more writing on the wall where all this is headed. Waymo said we're now providing more than 250,000 fully autonomous paid rides each and every week. If you run the math and assume a 1,000 vehicle fleet for easy math, that's about 1,488 rides per hour. That number is of course across the fleet. And then if we assume an average of $22.50 in revenue per ride, that works out to an annual revenue of about $292 million. But since that's an estimate, if we go on the lower end at $15 per ride, that annual revenue is $195 million a year, or $30 per ride is up to $390 million per year. And as I said earlier, Waymo likely lost over $1 billion in Q4. Doing some more math, this works out to about 250 rides per vehicle per week, which is about 36 rides per day. And it's actually reasonable use because we have to remember just May of last year, Waymo was only doing 50,000 rides per week. So there's your 5x in about 1 year. I say it all the time, I'm rooting for Waymo, don't misunderstand me, I'm just not seeing a path to them being successful 5 years from now. Tesla is running a handful of different promotions right now in the United States. Sawyer shared them all in one place, so go ahead and pause the screen and read if you'd like. Is it a great sign for demand? No, but at this point, should Tesla just be focused on getting these robotaxis, future robotaxis on the road? Take the slight financial hit now and then make it up later with FSD purchases and subscriptions. Don't forget, Elon said they would drive margins down to zero if it meant getting more vehicles out on the road. And before I send you off into the weekend, I have to ask what you guys think about this Slate pickup truck that's supposed to cost somewhere around $20,000. If you're interested, Out of Spec just put out a 20-minute video doing a walk-around tour of the vehicle, so I'll have that linked below. It was quite informative. It's apparently going to be a vehicle that you can heavily customize and make your own, so maybe they make some margins with all of that extra stuff. But business proposition aside, is this vehicle really appealing to that many people? So let me know below, what do you guys think? Tesla stock closed the day at $284.95, up 9.8%, while the NDX was only up 1.14%. So this was a major outperformance day by Tesla. And the volume was 25% above the average. And we will likely find out next week if Tesla stock is ready to break through this 285 line of resistance or if it gets rejected one more time. Don't forget, check out Delete Me linked below if you're interested before you go. And as always, I cannot thank you guys enough for supporting the channel through these sponsorships. Hope you have a safe and wonderful weekend. Please like the video if you did. You can find me on X linked below. And a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.